We don't have to be here.
Talk about the myth of Sisyphus and how it relates to our life.
The myth of syphilis. Oh, Sisyphus, my mistake. As you get older, you lose abilities. One of them is just not hearing things well. Like you go home, your wife looks at you and says, I love you. You say, I hate you too. I just said, I love you. But the myth of Sisyphus. May I ask why you're interested?
We talked about it in a different philosophy class.
Wait a minute. You had an instructor who talked about the myth of Sisyphus in a different class? What class?
Philosophy.
Who was the instructor? Yes, good morning. How are you?
Right.
Your knees okay?
Something else.
Oh,
I had 2 of them last week.
you should have just stayed home and relaxed.
Sickest.
Yeah.
I don't feel.
Yeah, staying in the hospital, it can kill you. Yeah, well, it's good to see you.
Hey, Monday.
We were here Monday. You might have come here on Wednesday. There were no classes Wednesday because they decided to.
That's what it was Wednesday.
Yeah. They were being developed professionally.
They were teaching you guys.
Yeah, something like that. Okay, so the myth of Sisyphus, that's one topic. Anyone else?
Why do we keep going?
Okay, so let's do myth of Sisyphus, and then we'll do loving objects. Objects?
Cars, trucks, ex-wives.
May I be blunt, Carmen? You're really far too young for this story. Good morning, Kendra. And I don't mean my statement to be offensive. Unless your temperament is a little dark and you've gone through things that kind of has seasoned you in some ways for that narrative, but even I'm too young for the story. But let me tell it to you nevertheless. Sisyphus is a king. And that's the first thing you need to understand. Hello. There is one of those Pope Gregory something around the 3rd or 4th century came up with the 7 deadly sins, and the first one, at least the most important, and off of that other sins come out, is called the pride. I. Can you listen to my question? Can you feel my emotions? Can you see how important my life is? So everybody is a tiny little king in their own heads. And what do all kings want? They want more power. They want to amass more territory. They want domination over other people. They want everyone to bow to them, to respect them, to honor them. That's what kings want, and that's what you and I want. I don't know how you felt when you asked your question, and then I went to Quinn and said, well, do you have any questions? And she said, yes. Can you tell us why we fall in love with objects, tables and chairs? I don't know how that made you feel. Maybe you felt as if your question is unimportant, which made you somewhat irrelevant. But all that aside, everything is ultimately rooted in pride. Without pride, there would be no envy, without this thing called I. So that's the first thing you need to understand. Kings. They're all about one thing, me. And you don't really have to be a literal king. You can be people like us in this classroom, that you have things for which you care, and other people kind of just trample all over them, disrespect them, dishonor them. Kings don't like to see losses of any kind. Kings don't enjoy negative emotions because that means they have lost some power. Kings are always about domination, control, about the past, about the present, about the future, most importantly, other people. That's what we want to do. This king, though, something very awful happens to him. I guess one day he's sitting having his bagel and cream cheese that he got from Noah, on Grand. And he thinks about death. Sometimes you can think about things without feeling them. Sometimes you can think about things and feel them. And sometimes you just feel about things, but there is really not much reflection behind the emotions. This particular king does something very, very strange. He sits somewhere and he says, well, if I was to die, what would happen? First, you will lose everything you own. Then you have no idea really if people love you or hate you or are just indifferent towards you. Then you have no idea what will become of you when you die. Is there a soul? Is there a God? There's a good amount of fear that comes with it. And though I can stand here and talk about it, the truth is I don't feel it. I was in Roseville since Thursday because my father was ill.
You okay?
Yeah, he's okay. Hello. Yeah. He got out yesterday, and he's 90. For some strange reason, it didn't bother me as much. Maybe I just felt that I've been around him for about 61 years. He's still going to be around. So the idea of losing him to death didn't occur. And even when I spoke about his death to my brother, I wasn't moved, really. Maybe I've become like concrete, far too callous. I'm not really quite sure. But to internalize something, it's like a person of color walking into the Lucky's in Montclair. And as you're walking from one aisle to the other, you see all these people looking at you, whether you're black or brown or blue. And you can feel other people's judgments, And you say, man, really? What's wrong with this? There's nothing wrong with this, really. But you internalize it. And that's what King Sisyphus did. He was sitting and internalizing, what happens when I die? What happens if my wife leaves me for another man? What happens if I go home and my kids look at me and say, Dad, I don't love you. Never did, really. When you internalize something, you're confronted with emotions you don't really understand. And even if you understood them, you understand them in terms of rationality, but they make a good of a mess inside you and you don't really know what to do. And the problem with death, and forgive me for rambling on and on and on and on, it takes everything away from you. Everything. You look yourself in the mirror and you feel nothing. You look at your life and you feel nothing. You're just a bundle of fear, that's all you are. So remember, Carmen, if I ask you what you want to be, you say, well, in 5 years' time, I'm going to end up at Stanford. I'm going to get a job at a cubicle, making $500,000 a year. I'll be happy. That's a very, very powerful I that has an agenda. Death looks at you and says, you have no future. I'll take it. And so, out of fear of death, envy inside him grows. And envy has a sibling. It's called jealousy. And jealousy has a cousin. It's called resentment. If death is going to take your life away, you're envious of who exactly or what? Well, the people around me will die. I remember many, many years ago, I was going out with this person. She dumped me. Can you believe that, Carmen? She dumped me. How's that even possible? I know most of you are sitting and saying, that's unfathomable. It happened. But you know what gave me comfort? I realized it doesn't really matter what relationship you walk into. After a few weeks or months or years, you will look at your companion and feel absolutely nothing. So what if she leaves me? Her love for this particular fellow will leave her, and she'll feel the way I'm feeling. No, just a matter of time. And I rested in that, and that made me feel good. Well, since other people die, I can't envy them. Maybe I can envy them for, having good looks or having good health, that they're going to live a few years longer than I. But in the end, they're going to face their own death and realize that their life has amounted to nothing. So our good friend Sisyphus envied the creator. And in his world, his name was Zeus. Zeus doesn't die. Zeus just lives on forever and ever and ever. And if Zeus happens to be my creator, why didn't he give me immortality? Maybe there's a secret that he has but hasn't told me. Maybe that secret is in a vault. You know the vaults you get from Costco for $500? You place your guns and this and that in there. Maybe Zeus has a vault in his bedroom with a secret of eternal life. So Sisyphus waits and waits and waits for Zeus to go out somewhere. And so he climbs through the window, finds the bedroom, finds the vault, opens it, and is about to read the script, eternal life. All of a sudden, Zeus walks in. After all, he is all-knowing, right? Says, what are you doing here?
It's a question he already knows.
And he goes into confession mode. I'm afraid of death. And that's another thing you need to understand. Though all of us may sit or stand here very comfortably, the truth is when death comes, it's frightening. You have all these dreams, all these hopes, especially when you're young. Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, the house, the car, the kids, your money. You want to keep them. So, Zeus says, you don't need to read the scripts. I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to make you immortal. You're never going to die. But there is a cross that you have to carry day after day after day. That's your burden. If you want to live forever. You'll wake up in your bedroom. You brush your teeth, wash your face, have your bagel and cream cheese, wear some socks, some shoes, and go outside. And there is this rock sitting by the door, shape of a basketball. It's huge though, 20 times as big. All you have to do is push it up the hill and try to throw it down. That's all. And if you're able to do that, you'll be forever happy. And he's a king. The arrogance that comes with just being young and inexperienced. He says, okay, I can do that. So he goes back home and he's very happy because he's immortal. He wakes up, does as Zeus had suggested, washes his teeth and face and all that. and pushes this rock up the hill. It's very, very close to falling from the edge of the cliff. But he gets really, really exhausted. And he can't push anymore. So takes a sidestep and watches in despair this rock just roll back down. He goes down, pushes the rock, gets tired, watches it go down, and does the same thing over and over and over and over again. I don't know if you remember the day of your birth. You screamed to be cared for, then you screamed to be nursed. Then you screamed for your diapers to be changed. Then you screamed because your neighbor's kid had a bike and you didn't. Then you screamed because they had shoes you didn't. And your parents bought you those. And then you screamed because you wanted to graduate and you did. You screamed because you wanted a bike and you had. You screamed because you wanted a car and you did. You screamed because you wanted to go to school and you didn't. You got some diplomas. Then you screamed because you wanted to get married or have a boyfriend and you did. You screamed because you wanted to get married and you did. And you screamed because you wanted children and you have. And you realize from the time you are born, from the time you're born to the time you die, it's like human beings are fated to see this rock the moment they open their eyes. It could be a dream, fantasy, imagination, purpose, goal, doesn't really matter. They push this rock. If I can just focus for about 4 years getting my bachelor's, I'll be so happy. And you do. And your happiness lasts for about a minute before you know it's time for you to look for a job. And you do. You're really excited about the first paycheck, but then you realize you're stuck in a cubicle. And then you say, maybe I should do my master's. Maybe that's when I'll be really happy. And then you do. And you realize the myth of Sisyphus really isn't a myth at all. It's not some story told to 2-year-olds. It's a story depicting human existence. That there is something about death that's very profound. It's in fact a blessing. If you really don't want to suffer anymore, if you don't want to watch your hopes being pushed up and then rolling back down, amounting to absolutely nothing, maybe death is really the answer to life. If you die, you have no body, you have no desires. There is nothing more to push. But there is another way you can do this if you want the past and the future to go away, if you want your dreams to go away, and for you to live relatively comfortably. Stop looking at the clock, saying when this class will be over, because that's troublesome. I'm not very animated. I've never been. I'm not very inspiring or exciting as an instructor. I've never been. My students oftentimes make the mistake of keep looking at the clock, hoping that the hands will move faster so it can quickly become 10:45, they can go home. And what the myth of Sisyphus tells us, instead of doing that, why don't you just sit back, pay attention to the way you breathe, the way you sit, the way you raise your hand, the way you formulate your questions, the tone of your voice as you ask the questions, and all of a sudden you realize attention does something profoundly interesting for you in your life. It pushes you to be in the present moment. Your question may suck. It may be uninteresting, but you're involved in it. You're engaged in it. There is no reflection. I think Martin Luther around the 15th century was right. Reflection is the whore of Athens. Why do we even do that? Don't think. Yeah, drink your Coke. Don't read the labels, how it was made, how it's going to poison your body. No, just drink it, enjoy it. And even if pain comes to you, see how this pain impacts your physical body, how it removes patience from you, how you're agitated all the time, how your dreams are being crushed by this disease. So, That's the myth of Sisyphus. It's a bad way to start the Monday, but that's the myth of Sisyphus.
Smarter, miserable.
Yeah, he's a very smart, miserable man. Yeah, I don't really know how anyone lives like that, but are we good? Sure. Let's say you go to a party, Quinn. You ask the question, why do we develop emotions towards objects? Something like that. And let's say you run into this man, let's call him Love. Is that okay? Love. It's just a hypothetical. There you are standing, and there he is standing as a man. He's bored, silly, he's immature, pathetic, a little infant in a big body. But as men go, anyways, he looks at you and he says, what do you say? Wow. For some strange reason, I have these feelings about her. But what are you? I mean, you're not a soul, you're just a physical body, right? You're an object. And all these women saying, please do not treat me like an object. Are you kidding? Look around you. So you're an object. He's not looking at your soul. He doesn't know your history. He doesn't know how you think about this and that. An object looks at another object and says, vow. And all of a sudden you have on your hand a political animal. I smell good. Okay, I can walk close to her. And he does. Should I say hi in a loud way or a gentle way? And he does. In the course of having conversations with you, those emotions evolve, or those feelings evolve into emotions. And then he summons up the courage and asks you for dinner next week, and you say yes, because you're as pathetic as he is. Lonely, or maybe you're just in a bad relationship. And so the two of you go out. He pays in and out. Alameda is clean. And then when you go home, you think about him. You go home by yourself, but you think about him. And you text him. How all of a sudden do you have feelings for an object you hardly know, care to know, or understand? I don't read the minds of cats. I don't even like cats or dogs. I don't like any animals. But there is this cat who comes and meows by the window. You know? All I can assume is that the cat is meowing because she's hungry. I go to 7-Eleven close to the house. I look to my left, look to my right. No one's watching me. There are no cameras. I put a huge bag of cat food in my backpack and run out. You know, in our culture, we don't pay for food. And I give it to the cat. And the cat just looks at the food. We inject fantasies in things. And that's what we do. That's how our life is spent. And only in death do you realize, how pathetic you've been most of it. So, I have cups in the cupboards. I haven't drank out of them for years. And every time my wife says, let's get rid of them. Oh no. Because that particular cup goes back about 25 years. Well, who the hell cares? It's just taking up space. But yes, I understand that, but it has sentimental value. So the point I'm trying to tell you is that's the sort of animals that we are. We just become attached to things. But you should consider yourself very lucky if you're able to become attached to things in a very intense way, because it means that you still have the capacity to feel, to make plans. I mean, consider someone like Jesus. I mean, how impoverished a life, where you look at things down here and you say, it's not worth it. Buying a house is not worth it. Having friends is not worth it. Being married is not worth it. Having children is not worth it. Having conversation with a family is not worth it. The only thing that matters, things that are up there. It's no way to live life. Yeah. So, you sure? Anyone else? Before we... Love?
How do you feel about time? How your perception of time changes?
So there are three modes to time. I don't know how time feels for animals, but for human beings, it's a very, very different story. First, because for such a small stature, our brain is really, really huge. It's like you can store a whole host of things in it, okay? So as you move through life, what you do is you store experiences. So if I ask you who love is, the best answer you can give me is a good portion of who I am is in the past. Okay, so I can tell you what my past is. And for that to happen, you have to go to the past, okay, go to your memory box, open some files, and drag the files that you find to be most valuable out. And then you talk to me about your past. That talking to me takes place in the present. So whenever you and I go out anywhere, do anything together, okay, you bring up the past, you inject it into the present, and that's what the present is consumed by, the past. When you go to therapy, how do you spend from 10 to 11 a.m.? You talk about your past. That's how you spent the present. Okay. So the present, of course, also has another function, which is you compare and contrast yourself to other people. That creates envy, jealousy, resentment, anger, mostly because you want the things that other people have, but you yourself don't have. There are sets of advertisements that bring about certain feelings and emotions about you. That creates for you a future. You look at your brother, he's a loser. You don't want to be a loser. So you have a future. I want to go to Stanford. And then you sit in your room and you fill out the application. That future, all of a sudden, occupies your present as you're filling up the application. So who is love? A portion of you is the past. A portion of you is the future. And these two things take place in the present. Now, if you happen to be like a Buddhist, a practitioner of Buddhism, or any isms, or you want to live in the present, for example, it means that every time the past comes about, like a windshield wiper, you just clear it off. No past. Okay? And just in case there's an imagination about the future, you grab it very quickly before it takes root and you trash it. You just live in the present. I'm not quite sure what that looks like. There are moments that all of us in this class experience it. Like all of a sudden everything disappears and you just enjoy breathing really, really deeply. or you're captured by a flower or a tree or a river or something. Those are very, very rare moments that happen to us. Now, the truth is, you have no choice but to engage your present moments from past contents. Why? Because all of us in this class make mistakes. Those mistakes need to be resolved. And the only way you can resolve them is by paying attention to them right now and figuring out what exactly it is you need to do. Future is also scary. You're getting older, uglier, smellier. Soon your body is going to fail you. And you've looked at history a little bit. What's most important for us is stability. You need money, you need shelter, you need clothing. Maybe you need someone to love. Maybe you need kids. You need to be good to your parents. Okay? And those worries, all of a sudden, engage you in the present moment so you can take care of them. So, time. There is another thing that happens, which is very, very devastating. You may come to realize that everything you've done in your past, kind of like King Sisyphus. Yes, you went to school. Yes, you got married. Yes, you have kids. Yes, this to this. Yes, that to that. But you realize that you're not enjoying any of them. You don't care for any of them. Now, if this not caring is not imposed upon you, but happens to you organically, it's like a ripe fruit. It just falls. And every time someone says, well, can you tell me about your past? You say, I don't really care about the past. I'm not interested. Now, a good portion of who you are is your past. If you've paid attention, most of the questions that people ask in this classroom, it's mostly about their past. And oftentimes, past unresolved. Okay? So it's very important to them. Rid them of that history. There are no questions in this class. And there are no intentions behind the questions that they ask. Okay? When your past becomes irrelevant, all you have to look forward to is your future. But if you happen to be a reflective type, you say, okay, well, like King Sisyphus, what exactly is it am I chasing? Okay, so I'm chasing what? To buy a Tesla? I bought a dinky Toyota Celica in 1979. It was banged up for $350. What did it do? Took me from point A to point B. What is a Tesla going to do? Sure, it's going to fetch me some attention. It's going to fetch me some respect. It's going to give me the illusion that I have power, stability, control, that I'm this and I'm that. How long is that going to last? About 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before I stop washing the car every day. And it's going to be another bigger garbage can, right? And all of a sudden something happens is even the future, with all the dreams and the goals that it could offer you, that too becomes irrelevant. So what you have is the present time. Now imagine the present time to be a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket. And for the past 20 years, you used to put contents or stuff from the past into this bucket, or stuff from the future into this bucket. Now that the future and the past have gone away, you look at this bucket and there is nothing in it. Now, you as a human animal, you have to spend this time somehow. If you don't put stuff in this bucket, what happens when you come to this class and nothing touches you? You get bored. You get frustrated. You get irritated. You become angry. And if that anger continues, you'll get really, really depressed because you have no power to overcome anger. And then if depression becomes chronic, that's devastating. So remember, this present, you need to make sure that the future and the past remain relevant. If they become irrelevant, this bucket remains empty. Then you are burdened with something profoundly devastating. What am I going to do with this time? What am I going to inject in it? I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship that's become stale. If you have, you may come to some grim places, which is, I don't want to have conversations, and I don't want to do dinner, and I don't want to look at him or her. just don't want to spend time with them. But they're just right there. And then you say, well, what am I going to do with this? And the truth is, well, you have to do something. So you say, how about dinner? How about movie? And while you're engaged in having dinner or watching a movie in the background, you say, I really, really hate this. So one of the problems that occurs for people for whom the past or the future become irrelevant is they have nothing to put in this bucket. And should they put something, it's completely meaningless. And they know it's meaningless. And they know they're faking it. So it's beautiful being young. Because, well, you can just put stuff in the bucket. You can go out on dates and talk about your past for hours and imagine that to be very interesting. And because the guy or the gal sitting across the table from you is more ridiculous and stupid than you are, you know, they're going to laser at you. Yes, please tell me more. This class makes me angry. Anyone else? Avery? Avi? You know someone really well, you said? You have 2 kids. They're not very complicated. They don't have much of a past. Their dreams are really simple. What do you want for dinner? Peanut butter jelly. It's finished. Why are you crying? I don't like my socks. You're not going to wonder, well, maybe they're just not happy with their life. Maybe they're on the spiritual quest, you know? So the more shallow a human being, the easier to understand them, the easier to know them. There are not very many hidden places. It's like my niece just moved to San Francisco and she has a studio. It's 250 square feet. There's the bed that takes 80% of the space. There is the fridge. There's a tiny dinky little stove, and that's it. And a tiny little bathroom. That's it. It won't take you very much time to explore and discover. And then say, okay, so I get it. Now imagine if you were to go to someone's house that has 55 bedrooms. Okay? So as the human being becomes more complex, whether it's through experience, resolved or unresolved, if I have an experience and I've understood it really, really well, for example, why I hate my father and why he was never around, well, you and I can have wonderful conversations about this, and we can go where no man has gone before, Star Trek version, because there are all these hidden places that you have to explore. Okay? And with every discovery, you're going to have a brand new set of thoughts and emotions, and you have to deal with them. Okay? So the journey just continues. So the more complex a human being is, the more complex experiences are. It makes the person more difficult to get to know or understand. The other aspect is this. Not only do we change physically, but our surrounding, as the forces change, they force us to change as well. Okay. Let's say you come to this class, you're calm, you're cool, you're collected. You ask a relatively naive question. It's a silly question. And let's just say I take the question to places that make you a bit uncomfortable. And all of a sudden the environment changes you. And now you're confronted with emotions you don't really understand. And then you bring down your intellect to try to figure out why you feel a certain way. That doesn't help. And all of a sudden you're frustrated. You came to this class in a good mood. Now you're going to leave in a bad mood. And then you call your husband or your wife or your friends. And they say, why are you in such a pissy mood? And you just hang up the phone without saying goodbye. So we change because of our environment. We also change psychologically. That for some strange reason, if they're right, every psychologist, Every 7 years. And girls do this much better than, I mean, they have a far more horrific time they do than men. Uh, Hormonally, they change, you know, then after everything is done, menopause. So they change in ways that are just not understood by men, okay? Because we are constantly changing, the nice thing about the way we change is we only change in footnotes. The body doesn't change. It's like you add a footnote here and you add a footnote there and you add an endnote there, okay? You don't trash the entire thing and say, I want to start anew, okay? It's one thing for a wife to go to a husband and say, you know what, I think I want to do a PhD. I want to go back to school. They sit, they compromise, they make some adjustments, and things happen. That's a big change. In other words, what you're saying to your husband or your wife is, I'm not happy where we are, maybe financially, maybe intellectually. I want to make some changes. And that's manageable. It's very different than a woman going to her husband and say, I want a divorce. I mean, you're like uprooting a life. That's devastating. That's a huge change. You're not just changing the colors of the wall. You're just saying, I don't want to live here anymore. So, we try to hang out with people who don't change very often. They're like tables and chairs. It's awful, always awful, always to your disadvantage to go out with an artist. Because for the creative energy to enter into your body, you need to be a mess. Because when you become a mess, the things around you disappear. They lose their value. You go inward. And then out of that, something happens. You create music. Again, depending on the sort of artist that you are. Okay? So we are very cunning and smart and political in the sense that we are looking for people who don't change often. That when you go home and you say hello, they say, hello, how are you? Fine, how are you? If on the other hand you go home and you say, hello, please don't talk to me. Shit, what am I got myself into? And in as much as most of us desire change, we don't want changes that are fundamental, just tiny ones. But to your question, what was the question? Getting to know people? People? Knowing people? Oh, yeah. You don't. And it's really not worth getting to know people. Why would you want to know them? I mean, if you value time, you should invest your time. It's like buying a car. You know, you've saved money, and you say, now I want to buy a car. You go to car dealerships, 50 of them, and you pick a car. People should be the same way. The only people worth getting to know is, can you teach them a few things? But for that to happen, you have to ask yourself, do you have anything to teach that's valuable? If you want to chit-chat, that's fine. But, yeah. Quinn? Yeah. Avery? If you're talking about a connection between two 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, you're absolutely right. You need to get to know them. Okay? If you're 35, for example, or 25, and you've been in 2-3 relationships, they've all been bad, and you've gone through rehab, you've examined why you keep choosing, nuts in your life. Then you also want to get to know them because you just don't want to be in a bad relationship. And you want to be in a relationship because for you, relationships are valuable. There are some people who don't want to be in relationships. They're self-sufficient for the most part. You know, I mean, kind of imagine yourself when you're sitting and writing your essay for any class, or you're doing schoolwork, and your boyfriend comes to you and says, "Avery, let's go out and eat." You say, "No, I want to sit and do work. I like what I'm doing. But I'm bored." "Fine, I don't care. Go do whatever." And what you realize, what you're telling him is, right now, I don't really need you. I don't really care for you. In fact, you're a bother to my life. Get lost. Now imagine if your life was that about 15, 16 hours a day. I think it was Oscar Wilde who had argued that the best relationship you could ever have is one of self-romance. Why don't you just romance yourself? You have all these emotions, you have a past that's worth kind of exploring and discovering. You have a future, dreams worth exploring, discovering why they're there. And you have all these emotions and thoughts. You have passions and interests. I mean, you're only 18 or 19 or 20. It's going to take you about 20 years to figure out why you have those emotions and you have those thoughts and fantasies in your head. That's a beautiful self-romance. If you were to be engaged in that, you wouldn't have time for another human being. The more in depth, the more mature you are, the more depth you will look for other people. And so when you want to connect with other people, your language is different, your emotions are different, what you're projecting is different. So I think, I'm not sure. I think the best place to be in terms of relationships, I went to Costco yesterday and I just bought 2 bags of potatoes. I only need 1 bag. But just in case I run out, I can just go to the garage and get it. Be sufficient unto yourself. At the same time, have a boyfriend in the garage. Just in case you get bored, just in case you want to go for a walk, just in case you're tired of eating food alone or watching a movie alone, you know, send them a ring. "Johnny, I'm in the living room. Come watch a movie. When the movie's done, get lost afterwards." That's a good relationship. That's a good connection. And treat him nicely. Just in case you get sick, he can take care of you. And if he doesn't, he'll feel guilty. Yeah, Connor.
Was Oscar Wilde a miserable pile of shit?
He was, but oftentimes shit makes good compost. Yeah,
And he got me there.
yeah, you perhaps there. Yeah, Jerry.
How important is like sexual and physical in a relationship? And how, what are the
For the man or for the woman?
both?
No, it doesn't work that way. You have to be specific. For women, it's very different than for men. Well, okay. Does the woman have children?
You just
Oh, no, it doesn't work that way.
why?
It's like you coming to my office and saying, "How many units should I take this semester?" I can well to take 24 units. I said, "Well, I have 2 jobs, I have 5 cats, and 17 dogs." I said, "Okay, well, you know what? You should drop out of school and just take care of your life."
No one has kids.
Are they young or old?
I would say mid-20s. Like around your age.
And that is extra credit right there. Good job. You see that? Now, he lives in Oakland.
Names.
So what you have, I think, is the following. Look at sex as food. You don't want to eat pizza all the time. You're going to puke. You eat pizza, then you go for a walk, then you come back and you eat pizza. So again, remember, it's like food. And you won't have the same food every single day unless, like you've been dreaming about Zachary's for the past like 5 months, you save the money, you go in there, and you order an extra large. And this huge thing comes to you and you eat the whole thing. I'm talking about a normal human being, okay? When you're young, you have a healthy appetite, okay? Now, one of the things about food is this. A food that does not bring about pleasure, you won't eat. A food that brings about pleasure, you will eat. And the bigger, more your capacity, the more you're going to eat. Sex is one of those things that brings about a great amount of pleasure. And we are pleasure-driven animals. We pursue anything that gives us pleasure. Okay? Now, sex is also a very powerful force injected inside you by either God or biology or nature. I'm not quite sure which. Because if it wasn't powerful, we wouldn't be around. Okay? So it has to be there. If you are young, and it also matters if you're in love, and this love is recent, or you've been in the relationship for a while. If you're in love, it's like being at Zachary's. You want to have sex every day for about like a week and a half. And if you have work, you'll call your boss and say, I'm not coming in today. And you guys will be in bed for 15 hours. Okay? And little by little, if you have observed, what happens is, as you eat anything, your appetite for it decreases. It may be that the first 2 weeks you're in bed and you're doing it with your companion 15, 16 times a day. Okay? On the third week, it becomes 5 times. On the fourth week, it becomes once a day. On the fifth week, it becomes once every other day. And then just normal life sets in. Okay? It also depends if you have watched a lot of porn before getting into the relationship, because now you have the problem of addiction, where you really objectify your companion. Right? Now, you can have sex with love, you can have sex without love. Sex without love is you have it, you walk home. Sex with love, you have it, you stay there. And then emotions blossom and there. If you've ever had a companion, you guys have had like a disagreement that turned into a fight, and you guys had not spoken for a day or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. There comes a point where it's like this tipping point. You go pick her up, and you just hate her with your soul. But you have no choice but to pick her up from work. How was work? Fine. Okay. And you drive in silence, right? Drive home. Some of you are smiling because you've been there and you've done that. Oh, good for you. And then on the 5th or the 6th or the 7th day or week, let's make it more biblical. For 6 days you fight. Things are just a mess. On the 7th day, he gets in the car, she gets in the car, you look at him. How are you? Fuck you. All of a sudden, she jumps on you, you jump on him. And you park the car somewhere, and you guys go at it. Like animals. And all of a sudden, you realize sex, it's not so much about love. It's not so much about passion. If you want to categorize anger as passion, it decompresses or de-stresses you. It irons out the wrinkles. And then you guys hold hands, you go home and you have pizza from Round Table, Veggie Gourmet. One of the most important things about sex is that it is founded, first of all, on physical attraction. Then, hopefully, if things go well, sex happens. Sex that was founded on pleasure eventually blossoms into sex that turns into love. Love, unfortunately, creates obligations. Then you will get married. At a certain point, a woman looks at you and says, I want children. Okay. Now, up to this point, you guys were having sex like once a day, let's say. Okay. Now comes the business of life. Kids, house, no sleep, making food, taking care of 1,001 things. Eventually, what you have is, if sex was up here, then it goes to the second floor or the basement. And little by little, as time goes on, as life gets more busy, as you get more exhausted, as other passions and responsibilities come in, sex occupies a less dominant position in life. But once in a while, you need it for relevance, for importance, for this ridiculous way that we connect to our companions. And really, it is the quickest and the easiest way for you to feel that you are alive and your life means something, even if it's for a moment. If you read the Gospel of Matthew, the Beatitudes, one of the Beatitudes that he missed, blessed are those who never have sex, for they shall enter the kingdom of God. He never said that, but perhaps he should have. Anyone else?
Sure. If every step in experience we take, we'll compare it to staircase, learning as we grow, taking steps up the hill. Eventually we get to a point where the steps are getting larger and larger as it's harder and harder to make progress. When you reach a point where a step appears more like a wall, you know technically you can get up it, but you're not sure how and you can't go along. Where do you go to figure out? Like, you don't have an answer because the next step is too far up. How do you go about figuring out what's next?
The only reason why you go up the stairs is you have, first of all, the power to do so, and you have the means to do so. So, with some reflection, with some cunningness, with some observation and attention, you can get yourself way up there. Sure, you need to be patient, you need to be forgiving. There comes a point that all of us in this class hit a wall that remains unmoved. You can do a couple of things. Aesop, the Greek satirist, and for those of you who may not know what satire is, sometimes you run into a really, really difficult situation in life, and you realize that the only way you can deal with it is by making it a joke. Not because it's funny, because it's the only way you can cope. So your narrative reminds me of a story that Aesop had mentioned, that the sour grapes. And I know many of you in this class have heard the story, but some of you haven't, so here it is. It's about a fox. And fox are known to be very, very cunning animals. And consider the fox to symbolize the human being. They're profoundly cunning and clever. We'll do all sorts of things to get our way, okay? So this particular fox loves grapes. And as he's walking, he sees grapes. The only problem is there is a fence between him and the grapes. So he puts his hand through, tries to catch or grab a couple of grapes, but the grapes are a little further away from him. So he tries and tries and tries and tries. And that's the staircase you're talking about. He employs all of his cunningness. He does all sorts of things, only to realize at the end he's exhausted, is irritated, is frustrated, is angry. And after all the energy that he spent, he doesn't have the grapes. He does something strange, something that all of us in this class do. He gets up and walks away saying, maybe the gods didn't really want me to have grapes today because they're not yet ripe. I'm sure when the grapes become ripe, I will try again, and next time I will have them. You can either kind of accept the fact that you're incompetent, you don't have the tools, you're not ready, you've reached your max, and that in itself is a great realization that, every one of us in this class, we have a limit. There are certain things we can do, and there are many things we can't do. Know what you can't do. If, on the other hand, you think that this is another wall you can climb over, and you've been very close, maybe what you need is not so much climbing the wall, but climbing the wall of patience. Just sit there patiently. And the truth is, it may be that they may never open the door, that you may never be able to climb over the wall. It may be that maybe time will reveal things to you. So, can I tell you a story? When my sister was very, very young, there was this kid, and she had never dated. So there's this guy, he was doing, I think, his PhD in something. My sister was like 19 or 20. And this guy was like 23 or 24, very young. And there came a point where my sister told him, listen, please don't call me anymore. They tried hanging out, but because he was young, confused, he was messing up my sister. The tragedy for this young boy was that his brother pursued this young woman, stalked her, pursued her, harassed her, and eventually the young woman said yes to him. They got married and they had kids. That was the piece of advertisement that he had, that if I pursue this person over and over, she'll eventually say yes. Not knowing your capacity, not knowing your limits is one of the greatest tragedies any human being could ever experience. That I walk into class and I want to become the next Socrates. I want to be the next Jesus Christ. That's my fantasy. And the truth is, I'm none. And I blame the students because they don't help me shine. I blame the books because they're far too stale. I blame the questions. I blame my tiredness. And the truth is, listen, temperamentally, capacity-wise, I'm just not wired to be like a Socrates. I just was interested in reading a couple of books. Luckily, I got some degrees, came to class, I talk, I get paid, and I go home. That's my capacity. So there are lots of things, and you won't know your capacity until you try, and try, and try, and try. And then you'll be resentful, and then you'll be angry, and then the blaming game starts. It's his fault, and her fault, and all that. And then comes a point where you sit and rest, and you simmer in all these emotions, and you say, Iska, you're just not made for it. And then you rest. But because of the element of, I think, the first sin, pride, you're always going to assume that you can get there. Always. Until pride is hammered out by humility. And the only way you can get humility is by really understanding things really, 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 really well. So, yeah. Kendra?
Lines or lemons.
I don't think it makes much of a difference because you're always in the cradle of forgetfulness. You can realize something and it can be very profound. I'm not talking about like those moments where you become enlightened and your life changes forever. I'm not, just tiny realizations about ourselves. I think you make some notes on it. You change for a few minutes the way you walk, the way you sit, the way you breathe, the way you think, the way you feel, your perspective about life. And then all of a sudden, life pulls you back into its own cradle and you become engaged and occupied and time passes. And just before you go to bed and say, man, this thing I realized at 10 in the morning, 10:30 I forgot, life consumed me, and 15 hours later I realized what I experienced at 10 in the morning. How could I forget? That's what happens. One of the functions of good teachers is they make you feel, they make you realize, and they keep hammering until that realization becomes the core, the very center of your passion, your thoughts, your emotions, your goals, your past, your future, and your present. Until then, there isn't really much chance to do much with any of the realizations that come to us. When I was very young, I had this companion. She was very, very kind in many ways, but she was emotionally paralyzed by multiple sclerosis, MS. Her body was a mess. And we were both very, very young, you know. Your bad back, my bad back. And she had these wonderful dreams and visions and experiences, but they didn't mean anything because MS was far too profound in her life. And she was angry about 15 hours a day, even though she had just woken up from this beautiful dream, you know. So most of the things we experience, even though profound they may be, I mean, you may realize you're a racist. I mean, look at the movie American History X. Okay? What took for him to change his perspective about people of color, there was no escape from prison. He couldn't run away. He had to be confronted with the fact that white people are much more mean than black ones, than brown ones, than yellow ones. His best friend eventually became an African American. But it took place in prison, and he had to kind of witness it day in and day out. And then he changed. And then with that transformation, when he was released, he realized his own brother now is in this cult, the White Brotherhood, and he tried to rescue him. Okay? So realizations are good, but they need to somehow be burned inside you. You know, so, you know, we have like 3 layers of skin. 1st degree burn, 2nd degree, and 3rd degree. When the fire has gone through all the skins and now it hits the meat, now you're scarred for life. You have to be scarred for life. If there is a realization, it has to scar you for life in a way that you can't forget. Quinn, what time is it?
You have like 2 minutes left.
2 minutes.
How can someone tell between like something that's like, you know, trauma that's gonna affect them like long or like
You know, my father did something really interesting a few weeks ago when he came to our house. He went to our kids' room and he kissed them good night, and then he left. He's never done that before. And I think there is something about him that recognizes that his time is very, very close. Okay? I'm not really quite sure how his death will impact me. Metaphorically, or presumably, I would say, it's not going to impact me as much because I've been around this stuff for a long time. But I don't really know. It may be that it will impact me greatly. And right then and then, I may decide to just retire from teaching and leave my wife and kids and go to the mountains. Because I can see that capacity inside me. Okay? What usually happens, especially when we are younger, is kind of like Robin Williams and Al Pacino, is that you realize that you're an alcoholic. That's a very traumatic experience, okay? You say, okay, you know what? I think I can do this on my own. You don't need help. You're an individual, autonomous, creative, powerful, so you try. And you don't go near any bottles for about maybe a day or so. And then life becomes complicated, boredom comes back, frustration comes back, your past comes back, and you say, no, maybe I should just drink a little. And then you relapse. And then there comes a point, very much like Iska's question, you realize that you don't really have the capacity to do this on your own. You need help. This is too much for you. And I guess the point I'm trying to make in regard to your question is the following. All of us in this class assume that we are sufficient unto ourselves and we have sufficient tools to overcome traumas. And you will try. You say, well, yeah, it may be my past that I'm choosing these, ridiculous guys in my life. I'll change. You dump this guy and after a few weeks of healing, you choose another guy. And you realize you're choosing the same people just in different bodies. And you keep doing this over and over and over again until there comes a point you look yourself in the mirror, like Elizabeth Taylor, she gets out of the bathtub and you say, man, I look awful. And I don't really know how these things happen. Maybe after 20 years or 5 years or maybe 2 weeks, you look yourself either in a literal mirror or your intellectual mirror and say, you can't do this on your own anymore. It's too difficult. You keep making the same mistakes. You're not getting any younger. Grow up. And then you'll start seeking help, realizing that trauma is far more bigger and more powerful than your puny intellect and all the tools you got in your toolbox. So you wouldn't know. But from what little I know is that all of us in this class will do it on our own for a long, long time until you just get slapped by life really, really hard, where you say, I need help. This trauma is bigger than me. If you're lucky enough to run into someone who is a little bit more insightful than you are, and if you're able to create a relatively comfortable and intimate relationship with this person, whether it's a therapist or whoever, if that person has the power to impose his or her will on you, instead of you waiting 20 years for this trauma to pass you by with some hard work, 5 years. And by then you'll only be like 25 instead of like 955. It's good to see all of you. Take good care.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you, Gunnar. It's good to see you.